Hey Reddit, my name's Adam, and I just turned 20 last week. I didn't expect my birthday to become the day that pushed me to finally leave my parents' house for good. But I guess there's something poetic about realizing your worth right when the people closest to you try to strip it away. For as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. Not because anyone ever asked me to be, but because someone had to be. My parents, especially my dad, have always been about family loyalty, which really just means doing whatever benefits him and my older brother, Michael. Michael's 24, still living at home, and has a history of making big promises about life-changing business ventures that somehow always end with my parents bailing him out. I, on the other hand, found peace in working with my hands. Since I was 14, I've been collecting and upgrading my tools, drills, saws, precision equipment, everything. I loved building things, fixing furniture, even restoring old machines from the junkyard. It was more than a hobby. It was my escape. Every polished surface, every small success in my projects reminded me that I could create something good even in a house that constantly drained me. My tools were the one thing I bought with my own money, earned from part-time jobs and weekend repairs for neighbors. They were my pride, my independence, my future. Now, to understand how things went downhill, you have to get a sense of my dad. He's the kind of man who talks about sacrifice, but never makes any himself. He acts like the patriarch, claiming everything under his roof belongs to him, no matter who paid for it. My mom follows his lead most of the time, sometimes silently, sometimes backing him up with that tone of guilt she's perfected over the years. And then there's Michael, the golden boy. He's smooth-talking, confident, and always manages to make his failures sound like noble efforts. When he crashed the old family car last year, Dad called it a learning experience. When I asked to buy a used one with my savings, Dad said, "Cars are a luxury. Be patient." So, yeah, it's always been that kind of dynamic. Me working, saving, and staying quiet, while Michael gets applauded for trying. Still, I never let myself get too bitter. I had my tools, my small workshop in the shed out back, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that at least something in my life was mine. That brings us to my birthday. It was a Sunday, and I was supposed to have the day off. I'd planned to spend it in the shed finishing up a custom bench for a local cafe owner, my first paid commission that wasn't just from someone down the street. It was a big deal to me. But when I went out that morning, I noticed something strange. The shed was locked. Not just closed, locked with a padlock that wasn't mine. At first, I thought maybe Dad was just keeping it secure, but when I asked him about it, he didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Oh, that," he said casually. "Don't worry about it, son. We needed to make some space." "Make some space," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yeah," he said, finally folding the paper. "Your mom and I decided to sell some of the stuff in there. You had way too much clutter, and with Michael's new business idea, we needed some quick cash for the family fund. You'll get new tools eventually." For a second, I couldn't process what he said. Sell some of the stuff? Family fund. I walked outside and opened the shed, or rather, tried to. The padlock was gone now, and when I stepped in, I froze. The walls looked bare. The shelves that once held my carefully labeled boxes were empty. My workbench was gone. The big red toolbox I'd spent months saving for gone. Even the small wooden stool I'd built myself was missing. The air smelled like dust and betrayal. I went back inside, heart pounding. "You sold my tools?" I asked. My voice cracked, and I hated how small I sounded. Dad didn't flinch. "Yes, Adam. Don't make that face. You're overreacting. You live under my roof, and everything in this house is part of the household. Family comes first. Michael's trying to start something for us all, and sometimes that means sacrifices." "Sacrifices?" I repeated quietly. "You just sold my future for one of his business ideas." Dad sighed, as if I was being difficult. "You don't understand responsibility yet, son. Those tools aren't your future. They're just things. You'll get new ones someday. Besides, you don't need all that stuff right now." I could feel my hands shaking. "I bought those with my money," I said. "Every single one." He shrugged. "And you used them on our property. That makes them family property. You've been living here rent-free. Consider it even." Mom stood behind him, wringing her hands like she always does when things get tense. "Adam, sweetheart," she said softly. "You know your father's just trying to help your brother. It's for all of us." "No," I said. "It's for Michael. It's always for him." Michael chose that moment to stroll in, grinning like this was all a joke. Come on, man, he said, patting my shoulder. You'll get over it. Dad's right, you'll get new ones. Think of it as an investment in me. When my business takes off, we'll both win. I stared at him. You sold everything I worked for, I said slowly. Everything I built with my own hands. Stop being dramatic, Dad said, his voice rising slightly. You're acting like a child. It's just stuff. We'll replace it when things are better. That word, replace, echoed in my head. Replace. As if the countless hours I spent saving, the sweat, the nights I stayed up fixing old machines, all meant nothing. I realized then that my dad didn't just sell my tools. He sold the one piece of independence I had left. I didn't yell. I didn't argue anymore. I just stood there, looking at them, my father smug in his authority, my mother avoiding eye contact, and my brother pretending this was some kind of family bonding moment. Something in me went quiet. I went up to my room and sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the blank wall. All my plans, my projects, my dream of starting a small repair business gone. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn their respect, the times I'd hoped my dad would finally say, "I'm proud of you." But deep down, I knew that moment would never come. That night, while everyone was asleep, I walked out to the shed one last time. The emptiness inside it hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just about tools. It was about every time they dismissed my effort, every moment I was told to wait my turn, every sacrifice I made that no one noticed. I realized something important. They didn't see me as a person. I was just the backup plan, the steady one they could take from without asking. When morning came, I had a choice to make. Stay and swallow my pride, or finally take back what little control I had left. So I made a decision. And by the time the sun rose, the shed wasn't empty anymore, but the house was missing a few things. That's when it started, the real story. The one that made my mom gasp in shock, made Michael furious, and made Dad storm through the backyard shouting. Who emptied the shed overnight? The morning after my tools disappeared, the house felt heavier. Not physically, but in the way tension clings to the air like humidity before a storm. My dad acted like nothing had happened. He was at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone. My mom moved around quietly, setting plates, humming under her breath. Michael was on a call, laughing loudly, bragging to someone about getting seed money. Every laugh from him felt like a slap. I poured myself some coffee and sat down without saying a word. My dad glanced up briefly. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, as if he didn't know why. "I didn't," I replied flatly. "Well, that's on you," he said. "You shouldn't dwell on things you can't change. You're young. You'll bounce back." I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from snapping. Bounce back. That's what he always said when something went wrong. When the car I was fixing got taken so Michael could test drive it. When my savings, temporarily, went to cover Michael's credit card bill. When my mom's promise to make it up to me never materialized. Mom placed a plate of eggs in front of me. "Eat, sweetheart. You'll feel better once you've had breakfast." "Do you even hear yourselves?" I asked quietly. "You took everything I've worked for and sold it." "For him." My dad sighed, as if I were a petulant child instead of a grown adult. "It wasn't personal, Adam. You make it sound like we robbed you." "You did," I said. "You didn't even ask." He pushed his chair back slightly. "Watch your tone. You live under my roof. I make the decisions here. The money from those tools went into the family fund. We all benefit." I looked at Michael, who was now scrolling through his phone. "Do we all benefit? Or just you?" Michael smirked. "You're welcome to be part of the project if you want, man. I mean, you've got the time." "The project?" I repeated. Dad leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Your brother's starting a landscaping company. He's got vision, Adam. He just needed some capital to get started. Mowers, trailers, marketing. That's why we had to make that decision." "Wait," I said slowly. "You sold my tools so he could buy his equipment?" Dad nodded. "Exactly. And don't look at it like that. You're part of this family. When his business succeeds, we all win." I stared at them, speechless. The irony was so thick, it was almost laughable. I'd been working toward opening my own repair service for months. Even had a small online page set up for commissions. I was one job away from buying a used van to transport my work. And now my future had been traded for my brother's next failure, dressed up as vision. Michael looked up again, all smug confidence. "Don't be bitter, Adam. You'll see. Once this takes off, we'll hire you on. You can do the maintenance for our machines. Family business, right?" That did it. I stood up. "You took my tools to make me your employee?" Dad's jaw tightened. You're being ungrateful. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Ungrateful? You stripped me of everything I've built because you believe in his ideas more than my hard work. Mom stepped in, voice soft but firm. Adam, please. You're twisting this. Your father made a tough choice for the good of everyone. You'll get your chance to. You just have to be patient. I turned to her. How long have I been patient, Mom? When Michael dropped out of college and you used my tuition fund to pay his debt, I was patient. When he borrowed my car and wrecked it, I was patient. When he took my workshop for his storage, I was patient. But this, I gestured toward the window, toward the empty shed. This was mine. And you sold it. Dad slammed his hand against the table. Enough. You will not talk to your mother like that. I froze, not because I was scared, but because I realized nothing I said would ever matter. He wasn't listening. None of them were. The rest of the morning was silent. Michael went out to meet investors. Mom retreated to the garden, and Dad buried himself in paperwork. I sat alone, staring out the window, thinking about every time they brushed off my efforts. I thought about the old workshop, the smell of wood shavings, the hum of my tools, the quiet satisfaction of creation. All gone because my father couldn't stand the idea of me succeeding on my own terms. Later that afternoon, I heard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were low but carried through the thin walls. Mom, he's not taking it well. Dad, he'll come around. He has nowhere else to go. Mom, you shouldn't have said what you did. Dad, I said what needed to be said. He lives here. He follows the rules. Mom, but selling his things without asking. Dad, I don't need to ask my own son for permission in my house. I felt something inside me harden. That was the moment I stopped feeling like their son and started feeling like a stranger who just happened to live under their roof. That night, Michael came home beaming, holding fast food and acting like nothing was wrong. Big news, man, he said, dropping into the seat across from me. Dad got me a meeting with a local contractor. They might partner with me. Can you believe it? Yeah, I said quietly. I can believe it. He didn't catch the tone. This is the real deal. If it works, we'll have jobs lined up all summer. You should come on board before it's too late. Too late? I asked. He shrugged. Yeah, once it takes off, I'll need reliable people around. Not sure I'll have time to train you later. It was like he genuinely believed he was doing me a favor. I studied his face, the smugness, the certainty that everything would always go his way because Dad would make sure it did. Good luck with that, I said, standing up. He frowned. Don't be like that, man. We're family. Yeah, I said, heading to my room. That's what you keep telling me. Over the next few days, things got worse. Every time I passed my dad, he'd remind me that hard work is about attitude. He kept hinting that I should support my brother's vision. Michael started using my old storage cabinet for his supplies. Gas cans, gloves, hoses, all piled where my organized toolboxes used to be. Mom tried to play peacemaker, dropping lines like, you know how your father gets, or he's just stressed about money. But the truth was, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. My dad couldn't stand that I'd built something without his involvement. He couldn't stand that my success didn't revolve around his approval. By the fourth day, I'd stopped talking to them altogether. I left early in the morning, came home late, and spent my time thinking. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't staying there much longer. Then came the breaking point. It was a Thursday evening, and I came home to find Michael in the driveway with a brand new trailer hitched to Dad's truck. He was showing it off, talking loudly on speakerphone. I overheard bits of the conversation. Yeah, man, the money came through, sold some old junk my brother had lying around. He's dramatic, but whatever, he'll get over it. I froze. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Dad came out a moment later, slapping Michael on the back. Proud of you, son. This is how you make things happen. Michael grinned. Thanks, Dad. Couldn't have done it without you. I stepped closer. Yeah, I said quietly. You really couldn't have. Dad turned, frowning. Don't start, Adam. This is a good day. For you? I said. For me, it's just another reminder of what you took. Watch your mouth, he snapped. I laughed bitterly. Why? Are you going to sell that too? Mom appeared at the doorway. Please, stop arguing. Can't we just have one evening without this? But I was done being quiet. You want peace, Mom? Then admit it. You took my life's work and handed it to him because you didn't believe in me. Michael rolled his eyes. Man, you're so dramatic. It's not that deep. It is to me, I said. Those tools were all I had. Dad's voice dropped, cold and sharp. Then maybe you should have been grateful you had a place to keep them. I could have made you pay rent long ago. You're lucky I didn't. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I'd never win. Not by arguing, not by reasoning, not by waiting. My father didn't respect effort, only obedience. And Michael didn't care about anything that wasn't his own success. So I shut my mouth, turned around, and went inside. That night, I packed quietly, not just my clothes, but every small thing they hadn't noticed yet was mine. I wasn't going to leave empty-handed this time. The next morning, the house woke to the usual sounds. Dad making coffee, Michael bragging over breakfast, Mom pretending nothing was wrong. None of them noticed that my door was open and my bed stripped clean. And in the backyard, the shed door stood wide open. But this time, it wasn't empty. By the time Dad realized what was missing, it was too late. He came storming out, shouting my name, demanding answers. Michael was yelling too. Mom stood frozen at the door, one hand over her mouth. Who emptied the shed overnight? Dad roared, but I was already gone. And while they stood there fuming, trying to make sense of it, I was miles away, heading toward the place where the next part of this story really begins. When I left that morning, I didn't look back. The sun was barely rising, painting the sky in a hazy orange glow, and the air smelled like freedom and adrenaline. My car, an old pickup I'd bought cheap from a neighbor and spent months fixing up, was loaded to the brim with the last bits of my life from that house. A few clothes, my documents, some small tools I'd managed to hide from my dad's family fund purge, and a few personal things that reminded me who I was before everything got swallowed up by resentment. I didn't have a clear plan, but I had an idea. I'd been doing side jobs for a mechanic in town, Mr. Larson. He was one of the few people who actually treated me like I had potential. He once told me, "Kid, the difference between people who build things and people who take them is pride. You've got pride. Don't lose it." His words stuck with me, so I drove straight to his shop. When I pulled into the lot, he was already there, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee. His brow furrowed when he saw me. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "Didn't," I admitted. "I'm done at home. They sold my tools, Larson. Every single one." He let out a slow whistle. "Your folks did that." I nodded. "For my brother's business." Said it was for the family fund. He shook his head. "That's rough, kid. Real rough. But you did the right thing leaving. Once people show you they'll cross a line, they'll keep crossing it." I leaned against the counter, staring at the floor. I don't even know where to start. Everything I built is gone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You still got your hands, don't you? And your brain? You can rebuild. You can use my tools here after hours if you need to." It was more generosity than I'd expected. "I can't ask that of you," I said. "You didn't ask," he replied simply. "I'm offering." That was the first real kindness I'd felt in weeks. For the next few days, I worked at his shop during the day and slept in the small loft above the garage. It wasn't much, just a mattress, a desk, and a single lamp, but it was peaceful. I could breathe. I could think. For the first time, I felt like I had control over my own life. But freedom comes with echoes. I didn't expect my parents to just let me go quietly, and I was right. On the third morning after leaving, my phone started blowing up. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. First from Mom, then Dad, then Michael. Mom's messages were the same tone she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "Adam, your father is upset. You can't just leave like that. Please call us. We can talk this out. Then, we need to discuss what you took. Your father says there are things missing." Things missing. The nerve. I hadn't taken anything that wasn't mine. Just a few spare parts, some what I'd bought, and a few personal tools I'd hidden in the attic weeks before. Then came Dad's texts. "This is unacceptable. You think you can just run away and take my property? Everything on this land belongs to me. Return what you took, or I'll call the police." I didn't reply. Then Michael chimed in. "Real mature move, bro. You're making Mom worry. Dad says you took the generator and the compressor. You better bring those back before things get ugly." That one made me laugh bitterly. The generator and compressor were mine. I bought them secondhand from a retired carpenter years ago. They had no idea what belonged to who anymore. They just assumed everything was theirs. I ignored them all and focused on work. But the silence didn't last long. The betrayal that came next didn't come in a single moment. It crept in slowly, like rust spreading on metal until it finally breaks. A few days later, Larson handed me the shop phone. "Somebody's asking for you," he said. I hesitated. "Who?" He smirked. "Didn't say." Sounded like trouble, though. I took the receiver. "Hello. Adam," a familiar voice said sharply. "My dad." I tensed. "How did you get this number?" "Doesn't matter. You've caused enough damage already. You emptied the shed and stole family property. You're going to return it. Today." "I didn't steal anything," I said evenly. "I took what was mine." "You're in no position to argue with me," he snapped. "You're still my son, and you'll respect my house. If you don't return what you took, I'll file a report." I almost laughed. "You'd really tell the police your son stole his own tools? Go ahead. Show them the receipts. You don't have any, because you never bought them." He was silent for a moment, then said, "You're being selfish. Michael's working hard to support this family, and you're undermining him." "By existing?" I asked. "By finally saying no?" "You're ungrateful, Adam. After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I said quietly. "You mean using my savings for Michael, selling my things without asking, and calling it love?" "Yeah, I'm done with that kind of help." I hung up. Larson raised an eyebrow. "Family trouble?" "Yeah," I said. "Same story, different day." But it wasn't the end of it. Later that week, I found out what they'd done next, and that's when it stopped being just about pride. It became personal. I was scrolling through my social media one evening when I noticed something strange. My page, the one where I posted photos of my projects and repair work, was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd been hacked. But when I checked my email, I found a message from the platform. "Your account has been deleted by request." Confused, I checked the details. The deletion request had come from my dad's email. My stomach dropped. He'd had my login info from years ago when I first made the account and asked him to help me verify it. I never thought to change the password. He'd gone in, deleted my entire business page, and wiped out all my client messages, photos, everything. Years of progress, gone with one click. I called him immediately. He answered on the second ring, sounding calm. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you delete my page?" "I did," he said simply. "You're not using our internet connection to promote your side business anymore. I'm not paying for your little hobby." "It wasn't a hobby." I snapped. "It was my work." He raised his voice slightly. "You don't talk to me like that. You abandoned this family, Adam. You don't get to profit off the name you left behind." "The name I left behind?" I repeated. "You mean the one you dragged through the mud for years? You think deleting my page will stop me?" "I think it'll remind you where you come from," he said coldly. "You can't cut us out like that. You'll see that sooner or later." When I hung up, I just sat there for a while, staring at the wall. The betrayal wasn't just about deleting a page. It was about control. He couldn't stand that I'd escaped his reach, so he had to ruin what little independence I was building for myself. That night, I called my mom. She answered quickly. "Adam," she said, sounding anxious. "I'm glad you called. Please, can we talk?" "Did you know Dad deleted my page?" Silence. "Mom." Finally, she sighed. "He told me he was going to. I tried to talk him out of it, but you know how he is." "You let him?" I said quietly. "I didn't let him," she insisted. "He's your father, Adam. I can't stop him from doing what he thinks is right." I felt something break in me then, something small but irreversible. "Then you're just as guilty," I said. "Don't say that," she whispered. "You know I love you." "If that's love, Mom," I said, "I don't want it anymore." I hung up. The next morning, Larson noticed I was quieter than usual. "You look like you've been punched," he said. "In a way, I have," I muttered. "They deleted everything I built online. My clients, my reputation, it's all gone." He nodded slowly. "Then it's time to start again. This time without anyone's name attached, but yours." His words lit something in me again, a spark I thought was gone. I spent the next few days rebuilding. New page, new number, new contact list. I started reaching out to old clients and explaining what happened. Most were sympathetic, some even angry on my behalf. Slowly, the work began to come back. And then, just when I started to feel like I was stabilizing, the next betrayal hit. Michael showed up at the shop. I was under a car when I heard Larson call my name. "Adam, you've got a visitor." I slid out from under the vehicle, wiped my hands, and froze. There he was, leaning against the door frame with that same smug expression I'd seen my entire life. "Hey man," he said casually. "Nice setup you got here." "What do you want, Michael?" "Relax," he said. "I just came to talk. Dad told me where you were." Of course he did. He walked around the shop, pretending to admire the place. So this is where you've been hiding. Not bad. You're really serious about this, huh? I always was, I said. He chuckled. Yeah, I can tell. Shame about your old business page. You should have seen Dad when he deleted it. He was fired up. Said it was time you learned a lesson about loyalty. I stared at him, trying to read his expression. You think this is funny? He shrugged. I think you're being stubborn. Dad's not the enemy, you know? He just wants what's best for us. Us? I asked. You mean you? He smirked. Call it what you want. Anyway, listen, I might have a proposal. I folded my arms. I'm not interested. Don't be so quick, he said. My landscaping business is taking off. I need someone who knows tools and maintenance. You'd be perfect. Dad even said he'd let bygones be bygones if you came back home. I laughed, but it came out more like a scoff. You steal from me, destroy my work, and then offer me a job fixing your mess? Think about it, he said. It's family. It's what Mom wants too. That last sentence did it. My blood went cold. You talked to Mom about this? He grinned. Of course. She misses you. She says you've changed, that you're holding grudges. She told Dad it'd be good for everyone if you just apologized and came home. Apologized? For leaving? For standing up for myself? For daring to have a spine? That was the breaking point. The trust, what little was left, shattered completely. I'm done, I said quietly. Tell Dad. Tell Mom. Tell whoever you want. I'm not coming back. Ever. Michael raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Positive. He smirked again. Fine. But don't come crawling back when you realize you need us. Then he left. When the door shut behind him, Larson looked over. You okay? I nodded slowly, though my hands were shaking. Yeah, I said. I just realized something. What's that? That they're not done yet. Because if I knew my father and brother at all, they'd try again. They always did. And next time, they'd make sure it hurt even more. And I wasn't going to let that happen. After Michael left the shop that day, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. Exhaustion from the emotional roller coaster of the past weeks. Relief because I'd finally set boundaries. Clear, non-negotiable boundaries. But also an underlying unease. They hadn't finished. I knew that much. My parents weren't the type to let something like this go. But I also realized something else. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. For the first time, I had a chance to build something purely for myself. The first few weeks were rough. My old clients trickled back, but there were gaps, losses, and frustrations. Supplies were expensive. The old van I'd relied on for transporting materials had a bad alternator. I had to spend days fixing it instead of working on jobs. Some nights, I went to bed hungry because I prioritized buying a replacement tool over dinner. Larson gave me a corner of his shop, but I was technically operating on borrowed time. My finances were tight, and my energy was stretched thin. I also had to navigate the emotional toll. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from Mom, my heart would tighten. Adam, we miss you. Please reconsider. Every email from Michael bragging about some small win in his landscaping business made my stomach twist. At first, I almost faltered. I questioned if leaving had been the right choice. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe I should have tried harder to make peace. But the thought of walking back into a house where my efforts had been sold, stolen, and erased, I couldn't. I realized I had to stop reacting. I had to stop letting their actions dictate my life. So I started planning quietly. I made a strict routine. Work, sleep, work, repeat. I cataloged my old contacts, reconnected with local clients, and started offering small repair jobs, furniture fixes, machine tune-ups, minor renovations. Every job I completed built something tangible, something I could see and touch, unlike the digital destruction they'd inflicted. Every satisfied client was a small victory, a reminder that I could rebuild even if they tried to tear me down. Then came the first real spark of growth. One of my old clients, Mrs. Klein, owned a small cafe downtown. She'd hired me years ago to repair a broken espresso machine, and she remembered my work. She called me, asking if I could fix a batch of commercial mixers that had been acting up. I went over, worked late into the night, and left everything running perfectly. The next morning, she handed me a check that nearly made me dizzy. Not only was it more than my usual rate, but she told me she'd recommend me to her contacts. Within a week, 3 more small businesses reached out, asking for help. Slowly, my reputation began to rebuild. More jobs came in, larger ones too. I started making enough to rent a tiny workshop of my own. Not ideal, but mine. I installed shelves, organized the tools I'd been able to buy, and set up a corner for my own designs. The small victories, the control over my own work, were intoxicating. I had a rhythm again, a sense of purpose that no one could take from me. At the same time, I quietly gathered information. I started checking the local business registry, keeping an eye on Michael's landscaping venture. It wasn't difficult. He'd left plenty of paper trails. Every contract, every invoice, every permit he filed was public record. I noted the patterns, the gaps in his work, the weak spots. Larson even joked, "Looks like you're learning detective work on the side." I smiled quietly, but didn't say much. I didn't need to. I was collecting data, watching the pieces fall into place. Financially, things began to improve faster than I expected. One day, I fixed an industrial coffee grinder for a small bakery chain. The owner was impressed, and within 2 weeks, I had a contract to maintain and repair all their equipment monthly. That was the turning point. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something scalable. I hired one assistant to help with smaller jobs. I started scheduling jobs efficiently, buying bulk materials, negotiating with suppliers. My bank account started growing steadily, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of stability. The emotional side of my recovery was slower. I had flashbacks of Dad selling my tools, of Michael smirking as if he had a claim to my life, of Mom telling me I was overreacting. Some nights, I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd ever feel completely safe from their interference. But I realized that safety wasn't going to come from them. It had to come from me. That understanding gave me a strange clarity. And then came the first moment of unexpected empowerment. One afternoon, I was walking past a construction supply store when I noticed a familiar truck outside. It was Dad's, and next to it, Michael was pacing with a clipboard, looking flustered. Curious, I lingered at the edge of the lot. They didn't see me at first. I overheard Michael talking to a supplier on the phone, sounding nervous. "Yes, Dad's backing me. I need those materials today." "No, I haven't finished the paperwork yet." "Okay, but I'll have it soon." It was then I noticed the tension in his voice, the first real sign that maybe, just maybe, their plan wasn't flawless. I stayed hidden, watching him fumble with invoices and delivery schedules. A part of me felt satisfaction, not for Schadenfreude's sake, but because it was proof that they weren't untouchable. They had weaknesses. Everyone did. Over the next few weeks, I continued my work, slowly expanding my business. I started documenting my projects meticulously, before and after photos, client testimonials, detailed invoices. I wanted a record that no one could delete, a shield against any attempt to undermine me. My confidence grew with every successful job, and I noticed something else changing: the quiet satisfaction of proving myself. I no longer measured my worth by their approval. Every tool I bought, every project I completed, every penny I earned was mine alone. I also began networking strategically. Larson introduced me to a few clients who had bigger projects, and I treated each one as an opportunity to cement my reputation. I learned negotiation skills, marketing tricks, even a bit of accounting on the side. Slowly, I became more than a local repair guy. I was a small business owner with a growing reputation for reliability and skill. Emotionally, I was stronger too. I learned to recognize the manipulation and dismiss it before it affected me. Mom's texts still came occasionally, begging me to return or apologize. Michael still bragged about his progress, sometimes sending subtle jabs. Dad tried 1 or 2 weak threats about calling the police or reporting my business as illegitimate. But I realized that none of it had power over me anymore. I had my own clients, my own income, my own space. I had autonomy, something they could never take back without breaking laws. And quietly, in the back of my mind, I started plotting, not revenge for the sake of cruelty, but a strategic reset. If I could operate in the open, rebuild my credibility, and gain enough influence, I could control the narrative. I could protect myself and, if necessary, ensure they could never interfere again. I didn't need to act immediately. I just needed to prepare. I needed patience, precision, and leverage. One evening, Larson asked me how I felt about the past few weeks. I told him honestly, exhausted, angry, but strangely alive. "I feel like I've been blindfolded my whole life," I said, "and now someone finally removed it. I'm seeing the world clearly for the first time." He nodded. "Good. Keep that feeling. That clarity will take you further than you think." It did. Over the next months, I worked tirelessly. I expanded my small repair business into a proper workshop. I bought a delivery van, hired 2 more assistants, and started taking contracts I wouldn't have dared touch before. My name spread by word of mouth, and soon, I was receiving calls from clients in other towns. For the first time in my life, I was in control of my destiny. And the best part? They had no idea. Every success, every milestone, was mine alone. They couldn't brag about it, couldn't undermine it, couldn't steal it. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online. I just built, quietly, deliberately, until the foundation was solid. I knew one day my parents would hear about it. Michael would probably stumble across it eventually. But when that moment came, I would be ready. I would be prepared. And I wouldn't be the desperate, powerless kid they had left behind in that shed. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was rising. And rising quietly, unseen, was far more powerful than they could ever imagine. But just as my confidence was solidifying, the next shock arrived. One that I hadn't expected, one that threatened to shake everything I had rebuilt. It started innocently enough, at least on the surface. Business was booming, my client list growing steadily, my little workshop humming with activity. I was finally feeling like I'd reached a level of stability where I could think beyond just surviving. And that's when I realized I needed leverage, not out of spite, but for protection and, yes, eventually for payback. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I wanted something smart, strategic, and unshakable. Something that would make them realize that underestimating me had been their first mistake. I had always been careful with finances, meticulous with invoices, and diligent with documentation. But I hadn't realized how powerful that could be until an opportunity arose through Larson. He had been contracted for a large-scale renovation for a corporate client, someone who owned multiple franchises across the region. Larson was overbooked, so he offered me the chance to handle the secondary properties, big enough that I'd make real money, but under the radar. The contract required proof of insurance, business registration, tax documents, the works. For weeks, I prepared, ensuring everything was legitimate, above board, and fully traceable. I learned to manage employees, handle supply chains, and negotiate contracts. I even took a crash course in small business law at the local community center, learning the legal language and loopholes that could protect me. Every detail I learned wasn't just about growth, it was about power. If I could run a legitimate, successful business that couldn't be touched by them, I'd have the ultimate leverage. Then came the moment to apply it. One of Larson's clients, let's call him Mr. Whitman, needed a set of specialized repairs across 3 properties. Michael, as always, had boasted to Dad that his landscaping business could handle anything, and he was still using Dad's name as a shield for credibility. I saw my opening. I approached Mr. Whitman professionally, detailed the work I could do, and provided a fully licensed, insured, and verifiable proposal. I emphasized timelines, quality standards, and aftercare. Michael, in his usual overconfident style, tried to cold call the client using Dad's phone number, claiming to be the family expert. Whitman politely declined. Then I got the call. "Adam, we'd like you to take this on," he said. "We reviewed your proposal, and we're impressed with your professionalism. Let's start next week." I could feel the grin forming on my face, but I stayed calm. This wasn't a victory celebration. This was strategy in action. I now had a tangible win in a space my family thought they dominated. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the work. Each project was executed perfectly. I took photographs, recorded progress, and documented every step. I even started saving receipts and correspondence from Michael whenever he tried to interfere or undercut me. It was all evidence, quietly building a dossier that would one day become a weapon in my favor. The big turning point came when Larson casually mentioned an upcoming franchise conference. "You should come," he said. "Network a little. You might find some serious clients, people with money and influence." I took the suggestion seriously. I registered, prepared a portfolio, and arrived with my work displayed professionally. The conference was intimidating. People with large corporate names, slick presentations, and decades of experience, but I navigated it quietly. I didn't boast about being the kid whose tools were sold. I presented my achievements clearly, confidently, and calmly. And it worked. I gained 3 significant contracts on the spot, each one larger than anything Michael had ever claimed. Each one required upfront deposits, verified insurance, and formal contracts. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just ahead of my family. I was untouchable. They could no longer bully me, manipulate me, or claim authority over my work. Meanwhile, Michael and Dad were still operating on assumptions, still underestimating me. I had been tracking their projects quietly, watching Michael make mistakes, overpromising, underdelivering, missing deadlines. One evening, while reviewing his public filings, I noticed that one of his clients had left a negative review about an incomplete job. Perfect. A crack in the armor. I decided it was time to execute a calm, precise form of revenge, not rash, not loud, just effective. I contacted Michael's major supplier. I presented myself as a professional business owner with a verified contract needing a bulk supply of equipment. The supplier, convinced by my legitimacy and references, agreed to prioritize my order. Meanwhile, I subtly hinted at inconsistencies in Michael's account of past orders, enough to seed doubt without directly accusing him. Within days, Michael faced delays because the supplier was double-checking his accounts. His timeline slipped. His confidence faltered. Then I went one step further. I reached out to a few of Michael's major clients. I offered my services subtly, under the guise of being an independent specialist who could solve problems quickly. I didn't advertise that he had failed. I simply demonstrated competence and reliability. A few clients switched over quietly, no dramatic confrontation, no shouting matches, just lost opportunities for him. The irony was intoxicating. The next piece fell into place almost accidentally. Dad, of course, was still talking about me behind my back. One afternoon, Larson picked up a small tidbit while discussing his own business dealings. Dad had been bragging to a local contractor about Michael's supposed dominance in the landscaping market, casually disparaging me at every opportunity. I filed that mentally. That information, combined with the contracts I was securing and the clients I was absorbing, created a picture of controlled, quiet dominance. They didn't even know I was in the room, running circles around them. I also leveraged social proof carefully. I started accepting referrals from satisfied clients, letting word of mouth speak instead of any confrontation. My reputation grew quietly but solidly. By the end of the quarter, my business income had tripled compared to Michael's projected revenue. Dad had no idea. Michael was floundering, and Mom still called occasionally, pleading for reconciliation I had no intention of giving. The climax of this phase of my revenge came when I decided to attend a local business networking dinner. Michael and Dad were both present, naturally bragging about their successes. I arrived late, casually, not drawing attention. I shook hands, introduced myself professionally, and casually mentioned my business in conversations with several influential people in the room. By the end of the evening, 3 significant investors had expressed interest in contracting my services. Michael noticed, of course, and his expression shifted from smug confidence to unease as he realized I was operating at a level he couldn't match. I left the dinner quietly, no dramatic exit, no confrontation. But I could sense the ripple effect. The next week, Michael's clients began calling me directly for services he had promised. Some even mentioned hearing about me through other sources. Dad, still thinking he was in control, had no clue what was happening behind the scenes. By now, I wasn't just surviving. I was strategically dismantling the illusion of their dominance. Every move I made was calculated, every action deliberate. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't done anything rash. I had simply positioned myself in a way that made them powerless without any overt confrontation. And the best part? They didn't even see it coming. Michael was furious, of course, when he noticed the shift. Dad was in disbelief. Mom was frantic, still sending me texts about how proud they were and how they just wanted the family together again. None of it mattered. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I was interested in equilibrium, and in making sure that the people who had treated me like a disposable asset could never threaten me again. By the end of that year, my business had grown beyond anything I could have imagined, and Michael's had plateaued. He made mistakes, missed deadlines, and became dependent on subcontractors, including me. Dad tried to lecture me about family loyalty, unaware that I now held the power he had tried to crush. I had quietly, methodically, and expertly turned the tables. And all it took was patience, preparation, and restraint. Every contract I signed, every client I gained, every step forward was both a personal victory and a strategic setup for the ultimate payoff, proving, without a doubt, that I was capable of standing on my own and thriving far beyond the reach of those who tried to control me. For the first time, I could breathe freely. I wasn't just free from their interference. I was empowered, untouchable, and completely in control. And while they thought they had the upper hand, I had already won, quietly, deliberately, and with a precision they would never see coming. But even as I built this empire, I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. Michael would falter further. Dad would make his next move. And I would be ready, not just to survive, but to execute the ultimate lesson they'd never forget. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't storm in screaming. I didn't announce myself like some dramatic hero in a movie. Everything I had built was carefully orchestrated to hit them where it hurt most, and they had no idea it was coming. By the time the final act played out, I was untouchable, untangled from their control, and calm, almost serene, in the face of the storm they had unknowingly invited. The first signs of fallout were subtle. Michael started noticing discrepancies in his invoices. Suppliers began asking him questions he hadn't anticipated. Did he actually order that equipment? Did he really pay for that bulk shipment? Questions that made him stammer and hedge, betraying the fact that he had been sloppy, overconfident, and unprepared. Meanwhile, my own accounts were pristine. Receipts, contracts, emails, all neatly archived, all verifiable, all legally unassailable. Then came the first domino. A local contractor who had once been Michael's client reached out to me. He'd tried to hire Michael for a landscaping job, and Michael had promised the world, but the work had been delayed for weeks. I stepped in, offered a solution, delivered perfect results, and quietly billed the client at a fair rate. That's when Michael realized the client preferred me over him. Not because of family ties, not because of any flashy pitch, but because I had proven reliability. Word spread quickly. In a matter of weeks, I had taken over multiple accounts that Michael and Dad had assumed were theirs by default. Each transition was quiet, professional, and irreversible. Michael tried to salvage his reputation, but every client I picked up quietly increased my leverage while reducing his credibility. Dad called a few of his contacts, trying to reassure them that Adam would come around, only to discover that my business name, my contracts, and my reputation were now far more prominent in the local trade networks. The real blow came when I secured a regional contract that had been Michael's dream. A major property management company was looking for a reliable contractor to maintain all their rental properties. They wanted someone trustworthy, professional, and verifiable. Michael had applied, relying on his family name and bravado. I submitted my proposal, professional, fully documented, insured, and backed by months of verified work and client testimonials. The company awarded me the contract without hesitation. Michael didn't get a call back, and Dad's attempts to intervene were dismissed as irrelevant. By this point, the family realized that their attempts to undermine me had backfired spectacularly. Dad was the first to confront me, well, indirectly. One afternoon, a neighbor who had been loosely connected to Dad's business called me, saying, "Your dad's talking about you. He's furious. Says you've outsmarted the entire family." I chuckled quietly, sipping my coffee, feeling the weight of months of meticulous planning paying off. Michael, on the other hand, had hit rock bottom. He had spent months bragging about his dominance, only to find clients slipping away, suppliers questioning him, and contracts quietly transferred under my management. He came to my workshop one day, red-faced and stammering. "Adam, we need to talk," he said. I leaned against the counter, calm. "We do? About what?" He hesitated. I don't understand how you're getting all these contracts. Dad says it's unfair. People are talking about it. About you." I smiled faintly. "I didn't cheat, Michael. I worked. I built something you underestimated. You were sloppy, and Dad encouraged it." He turned pale. "You're ruining me." "Dad will." "Michael," I said, cutting him off, "look at the facts. I left. You mocked me. You took my tools. Dad sold my property, deleted my accounts. I didn't retaliate with anger. I retaliated with preparation. Every move I made was legal, professional, and irreversible. You lost because you weren't careful, because you underestimated me. That's not my fault. It's yours." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, the reality sinking in. Every subtle jab he had thrown, every smug comment, every assumption that I would fail had been his undoing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't taunt him. I simply stated the facts, and those facts carried weight. Dad, of course, found out soon after. He called, trying to assert authority, his voice trembling with anger that had no power behind it. Adam, you can't just— I can, I said evenly. Legally, professionally, ethically. I didn't take anything from anyone that wasn't already mine to protect. And now, I'm thriving without you. You see, the difference between us is simple. I planned, you assumed. I built, you destroyed. I acted, you reacted. That's why I'm untouchable. There was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that carries the weight of realization. Dad's voice came out quieter, almost hesitant. You've outsmarted me. I have, I confirmed. And that's not up for debate. Mom tried one last plea, sending texts begging me to come home, forgive, and rebuild the family. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Their power over me was gone, their influence nullified. I had risen above their games, and nothing they did could change that. Michael, humiliated, eventually had to acknowledge defeat publicly. At a regional trade meeting, he tried to pitch a big landscaping contract to a new client. I was already the contractor they wanted. His excuses fell flat. The client didn't care about family loyalty, past promises, or appearances. They wanted results. I had built a reputation that couldn't be ignored, and Michael's failure was visible to everyone. The final fallout was almost poetic. Dad attempted to lecture me at a family gathering, confident that he could intimidate me with his voice and presence. I calmly listened, then outlined in simple, factual terms my business achievements, my contracts, my client satisfaction, and the documented proof of every step I had taken. By the end, the room was silent. The family who had once wielded authority like a weapon realized they no longer had any leverage, and for the first time, they saw me as fully independent, fully capable, and untouchable. Michael slumped in his chair, defeated and angry, while Mom's face reflected shock and disappointment. Dad, the man who had spent years defining himself through control, sat in stunned silence, unable to reconcile the reality of what had happened. He had thought his power was unassailable, his authority absolute. I had shattered both without raising my voice, without confrontation, without chaos. I had simply built, quietly and efficiently, until my strength was undeniable. Weeks later, I received a final, almost sheepish message from Dad. We underestimated you. You've made your point. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The message itself was the acknowledgement I had waited for. My revenge had not been about anger. It had been about precision. Every move I made had been deliberate, calm, and measured. I hadn't destroyed them physically or publicly humiliated them. I had simply exposed the truth of their mismanagement, their overconfidence, and their assumptions. And in doing so, I had taken control of my own life, my own future, and my own destiny. Michael eventually left the town in frustration, attempting to salvage what little business he could elsewhere. Dad and Mom had to adjust to a new reality, one in which I operated independently, successfully, and without their interference. The shed, the tools, the insults, the condescension, all of it became irrelevant. What mattered was my growth, my stability, and my power. I sat in my workshop one evening, looking around at the equipment I had acquired, the contracts I had secured, the business I had built from nothing. The satisfaction wasn't in making them suffer. It was in knowing that I had risen above them, untouched by their toxicity. That was the true victory. And in that quiet moment, with the sun setting over the town and the hum of my workshop filling the space, I realized something fundamental. I wasn't just free. I wasn't just successful. I was untouchable. For the first time in my life, I smiled knowing that no one, no parent, no sibling, no entitled family member, could ever take that away from me. I had built my future. I had reclaimed my power, and I had done it on my own terms. The family who once dictated every part of my life now had only one choice: watch as I thrived, quietly, relentlessly, and unbreakable. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.